This is an unofficial and unauthorized translation of a FIGU publication. 204th Contact. Sunday, December 22, 1985, 4:08 a.m. Quetzal says, unfortunately, it took longer until my present visit because I was otherwise occupied and was also absent. Moreover, I also strove to investigate some events of the future with respect to terrorism, assassination attempts, and other acts of violence that will happen in the next 3 decades. But since it was determined that no more official statements are supposed to be made about this, I may only mention this for you alone. Billy says, I just asked you for the most important events. Quetzal says, that is correct, therefore, I also only strove for such. Yet officially, in accordance with Patha's explanation, I may say the following: everything on the earth will change in the coming time, through neo-Nazism and through religious fundamentalism and fanatical extremism, just as much as through many assassination attempts and acts of terrorism, which will assume forms that will surpass everything previously known in this regard to a very great extent. The world and the thoughts and actions of people will change radically and completely. And not only will the fanatical hatred and the just as fanatical vindictiveness of the individual terrorists, assassins, and users of violence, as well as the small and large terrorist organizations, play an extremely disgraceful and degrading role, but also the hatred, vindictiveness, lust for power, and world domination plans of the governments of various countries, with their militaries and secret services. By the end of the second millennium, everything will take place relatively mildly in this regard, but after this, the time then begins, which will be full of tears and terror, especially in the world of the Christian, Jewish, and Islamic faiths. Billy says, then we are really approaching very rosy times. But you can tell me about that later, when we finish the official part of our conversation. So for now, I would like to address 2 things that concern myself. As you know, I had fallen ill to malaria on my travels to Africa and the Orient, as well as to the Middle East, and suffered some weak relapses over the years, after Asquith had cured me of the illness. Such weak relapses still appear every now and then. But even though they are no longer bad, they are still very uncomfortable and even annoying. As a doctor, do you know what I can do about it? Quetzal says, you're not even willing to let us help you. But in this case, I think that you should accept our assistance, at least then you'd be rid of these vile troubles for all time. Billy says, in this respect, it would be fine with me if you could do something. How should the whole thing proceed? Quetzal says, you'd have to come with me into my aircraft, then I can free you from your suffering, after which you will have no more troubles in this respect for the rest of your life. Billy says, in contrast to a new or mechanical arm, I'll gladly take your offer. We can go into your ship afterward, however, when we've finished our open discussion. Then I would now like to raise a second question. Since my collapse, I've gained quite a lot of body weight, namely 20 kilos during the first 2 months after my collapse. Since then, I have the greatest difficulties in decreasing or even presently holding to my weight of 90 kilos. I continuously starve my weight down, but as soon as I eat even just a normal serving, my weight shoots up immediately. How might this work? Quetzal says, you have to take many medicines, without which you can no longer live. These are what boost up your body weight. Billy says, you already said that once, which is why I also told this to my doctor. But he said that this was nonsense because medicines would have no such effect. Quetzal says, that is a nonsensical statement that attests to the fact that earthly medicine is still very backward in its insights and in its knowledge. The fact is and remains that medicines of various kinds contribute toward increasing the body weight. Nevertheless, it might still take a long time before the earthly medical profession investigates this fact, recognizes it, and then accepts it. Billy says, so it isn't a possible gorging that forces some people into obesity but just medicines. Quetzal says, that cannot be generalized because many people fall into obesity because they know no boundaries with food, therefore, they take in too much fatty food, which irresistibly increases their body weight. The resulting obesity in this form has nothing to do with that which is purely genetically conditioned. Billy says, then there is also a genetically conditioned obesity? As far as I know, our medical science knows nothing about that. Quetzal says, that is correct because this fact will first be recognized toward the end of this millennium, as well as other matters that are determined by the genes. Thus, for example, anxiety, sexual addiction, addiction to adrenaline rushes, addiction to extreme sports of every kind, addiction to the enthusiasm and fanaticism relating to the sporty or other achievements of other people, etc. Billy says, however, that won't please many people. Can't they defend themselves, then, against the effects of these certain genetic things? Quetzal says, that is absolutely in the realm of possibility if the person consciously and willingly concentrates on neutralizing, altering, or dissolving the genetic effects, which can usually be done in a mild way by the fact that distance is taken and achieved from those things that are the reason for the enthusiasm or fanaticism. The best way to do this is through a healthy self-initiative, through which things are personally done, actions are accomplished, or businesses are conducted, and so on, which require one's own logical thinking as well as one's own motivations and strengths, by what means successes are produced. Thus, the effects of the genes are cancelled by this and can be changed for the better. Billy says, but on the other hand, earthly genetic researchers, etc., say that this isn't possible. Quetzal says, that represents an erroneous assertion. At a later date, this statement of truth will have to have its rightful place, which won't be too far away because the initial findings of relevant kinds will already disprove the old conventional and erroneous conclusions in a few years. Billy says, how is it, then, with carelessness and contempt for life, as this appears, for example, with extreme athletes? Quetzal says, that is also genetically conditioned. Billy says, apparently, the brain acids are impaired by these genetic influences, and this then destructively spreads to the thoughts. Is that possible? Quetzal says, that is not only possible but actually the case. Yet now, my friend, it's time again that we end our conversation. You look very worn out again. Then until the next visit, which will only be on the 3rd of February of next year. Billy says, as you mean. Then until we meet again, and give everyone my best regards. Quetzal says, but now, you should still come into my aircraft, so that I can free you from your suffering. Billy says, oh yes, of course. Then let's go. But wait, I still have a question. My malaria dates back a long time ago, but I still have to struggle again and again with sporadic attacks. Is that normal? Quetzal says, not really, for such a phenomenon only appears in the absence of complete healing, and this happened because a new infection was given when the rest of the healing process expired. Billy says, so that means that I was newly infected toward the end of the healing process, when Asketh cured me. But how was that possible since at that time, I no longer resided in Africa but in India? Quetzal says, that isn't surprising because the Anopheles macula penis has already spread for a long time, even in the Far and Near East as well as in Western Asia and so on.